What do you see when you look at this picture? You might say, I see a guy making a really funny face, doing some weird thing. You might say, hey, that's a swimmer, I know that. But when I look at this picture, I see my good friend Jackson Allman, really amazing high school swimmer and state competitor this year. But I also see one other thing about him, something that you might not see on the surface of even just reading up about him or meeting him. I see that he needs to get out of his physical education class. It's holding him back and it's preventing him from being the best athlete he can be. I'm Adam Dreismeier, and today I'll be talking to you about why student athletes should not have to take physical education. I'll go over 3 main points today. We'll start with a warm-up, where we'll talk about how athletes gain more from the sports that they play and participate in. Next, we'll move on to the main workout, where we'll talk about how PE can negatively impact an athlete's performance. And finally, we'll cool down with better alternatives to a physical education class for student athletes. Starting with our warm-up, we'll talk about how athletes gain more in terms of physical activity in their sports. According to a report on USA Today, the U.S. government set a guideline for schools that students should spend 60 minutes per day in a physical education class of physical activity. That amounts to about 5 hours a week, which is very reasonable and should be an expectation for most students. However, a study by publicschoolreview.com found that students really only spend about 15 minutes a day in PE class performing physical activity, which is nowhere near the 5 hours a week that the government is mandating. And then to look at how athletes gain more and participate more in physical activity, athletes spend about anywhere from 1.5 to 2.5 hours at practice every day, and those practice times can range from 5 times a week all the way up to 8 times if you have a Saturday practice. This amounts to 10 to 15 hours a week, which is vastly superior to even the government mandate, which students on average aren't even meeting. Moving right on into the workout, we will look at how PE can negatively impact an athlete's performance. One of the most obvious reasons PE can be harmful to an athlete is that it will make you fatigued and tired for the rest of the day. If you had a game or a meet or big competition coming up later in the day or even on the weekend after, doing things like heavy lifting or playing a game of soccer can really wear you out. Another way PE can negatively impact your performance is the possible risk of injury. According to a study by NBCnews.com, injury due to the high government push for students in physical education, the percentage of injuries in PE has risen by 150%. That can be very detrimental to an athlete's performance, even if it ranges from a small sprain all the way up to a chipped tooth and a concussion. Ask 2016 graduate Kevin Brannigan about that one. And finally, athletes can have trouble juggling school and sports, especially if you either challenge yourself with a lot of very difficult classes or you just find that you are not as strong of a student. PE can take away valuable time that a student would need to finish their homework when they don't have as much time after school as an athlete. Finally, we'll cool down with some better alternatives to a physical education class. Obviously, with my last point in the point before, students could have a study hall in favor of PE. This could be used as simply a resting time to collect your thoughts and prepare for the rest of the day. You can finish homework that you know you will not finish because of a game or just a late practice, or you can take other classes and alternatives, or you can catch up on graduation requirements. Another alternative would be to have the health aspects offered in a class, but not maybe the physical activity, which can always be very helpful to any person. And finally, a nutrition or nutritional balance class could be taught in favor of a physical education class, as not all sports stress the importance of nutrition in an athlete's life. So to recap, we went through how athletes gain more from their sports, how PE can negatively impact their performance, and some better alternatives for PE. I hope that you have now learned why my good friend Jackson Allman and I, and all other athletes in high school, definitely need to get out of PE and definitely deserve it a little bit more. As a concession statement, not all sports require the same amount of physical activity or physical conditioning, like, say, running compared to bowling or swimming compared to tennis. This is true, and then if all students just wanted to go into those sports to skip out on PE, then I would hope that it would then be on the coaches to set either some conditioning requirements for the sport or to have tryouts to cut down on the number of athletes participating in their sport. Thank you.